Hello, everybody. Welcome to AGO from Home. It's our talk series and performances that we are currently doing online because of COVID and our desire to keep everybody healthy by staying at home. Our museum, the AGO, is open for visitors. You can book online your visit, but for the rest of us staff, we are still working from home. It's my pleasure tonight to have an artist spotlight on Luke Parnell. Hi, Luke. Say hi.
Hello.
Before we begin, I just want to thank TD and the Ready Commitment. They are our lead sponsor of talks and performances, and I just want to thank them for their generous support of this talk as well. I'm Wanda Nanibush, Anishinaabe from Both First Nation, from Chimnasing, a little island in Georgian Bay, and I'm Mayangan Dodem, or Wolf Clan. And I'd love to invite Luke, who's an amazing artist and also an assistant professor at OCAD U, to introduce yourself in the way that you would like to.
Okay, hi, my name is Luke Parnell. I'm Nisga'a from Gingolx and Haida from Massett. I grew up in Port Edward, British Columbia.
Nice. Speaking of where you grew up, does where you grew up at all influence your artistic practice? And if so, how?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously because, you know, I do Northwest Coast Art and it's Port Edward's in the Northwest Coast, so, you know, it influences me heavily in that way. And I think just in general, you know, my journey as a person started there.
Yeah.
And you know, and also because it was a fishing village, but it wasn't a reserve or anything. So there were natives and non-natives all grew up together in the same space.
Oh, nice. How did you come into art? Like, was it around all the time?
It was around me all the time, but I was always a talented artist. I always loved making art my whole life, and it's sort of what I was known for. And you know, it's weird because I know more about my Nisga'a heritage and my Haida heritage, but I grew up very Haida, and Haidas really sort of have a lot of respect for the art. And so because I was talented and I showed that I could make it, I was encouraged quite a bit growing up to make art. And that makes a huge difference, I think.
Yeah. You had talked once about how you had apprenticed under a Master Carver, Henry Green, I believe.
Yeah.
You want to talk a bit about that process?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. I actually was living in Toronto here, and Henry was running a toolmaking course in Haida, and my cousin Ian was apprenticing with Henry at the time. He was running with Eli Milton. And so I wanted to make tools. I didn't know how to carve at the time. I was just I graduated from OCAD and was sort of just kicking around Toronto doing a lot of nothing. So I decided to go out and take the course, which was really great. It was a really great toolmaking course. And I got to know Henry. And when I was there, Christian White, who was a friend, or who was friends with his dad was friends with my dad. And Christian is Master Haida carver. And so he was really friendly with me because of that relationship my dad had with his dad. And so he gave me a piece of wood and he's like, here's a piece of wood, start carving it. And I was like, I don't know what to do, man. So Henry said, when we get back to Rupert, I'll show you how to carve that. And so that's how it started. And I just started showing up every day and Henry showed me to carve, and then I ended up apprenticing alongside my cousin Ian.
Oh, beautiful. How does it work? Like when you conceptualize, do you know what you're going to carve first? Do you have a vision of where you're going with a piece of wood? Do you let the wood speak to you? Like, how does that kind of work for you?
For the most part, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Occasionally, I'll sort of that comes with experience, but you can let the wood speak to you a bit more. When you're first learning, you're really learning how to use the tools, and you're learning how to work with the wood, so you have to have a plan. And so when we first started off, I started off by looking at old pieces and just copying them. That's what Henry told me to do. And so then after a while, you do that for a while and you start getting your own ideas, but it really helps if you have like a solid plan, like you draw it and you envision it, you know exactly what you're going to do. And then after a while, when you sort of get really good at doing that, then you can start sort of letting the wood speak to you a bit more. It's important to know your woodworking with though, because you can run into some problems. Like when I was first starting out, I was carving a front lid out of this piece of alder, and I didn't know that it was rotten in the middle. And so I spent all this time carving it, and then when I started carving deep, it was all rotten, so I had to just throw it away.
Oh no.
So I was just starting, so I wouldn't have been that good anyway, but still, you have to learn it. The wood can speak to you that way. And knowing good wood from bad wood, I mean, that takes time. Like flat grain can be a pain. I've carved a lot of it though.
Yeah.
Your tools just have to be really sharp.
Is it because it's harder to work with?
The grain's too far apart, so the tool will bounce, and it leaves sort of like a shaky line in the wood. And it can be really hard to carve subtle detail with it because it wants to tear all the time.
Okay.
And sanding too, you can never really sand it flat because the grain is such a huge distance between the grain. So it can be a pain all the way around.
Okay. And then you studied at OCAD as well, and you did a master's out west too, right?
Yeah.
Was it in art making itself? And then what's the difference in learning inside the academy versus learning, from a master carver?
It's quite different because I studied sculpture at OCAD back in the late 90s, mostly with Ian Carr-Harris. And so that was like, obviously it's a classroom and it's more about conceptual art, and we're just sort of given projects and we just come up with our own ideas. And I didn't really know anything about Northwest Coast art at that time. I sort of knew a little bit sort of that I gleaned growing up. And so it was quite different, and then years later I apprenticed with Henry. And so for a few years when I was apprenticing, I wasn't really using any of the skills I learned at OCAD. I was mostly just, like I said, just copying things or creating new things, but they're really based on old things. So it was really more about learning how to carve and also learning about my culture. Like I joined a dance group, Gingolx Nisga'a, and sort of learning how these objects were used traditionally. And so it was quite, like I said, it's quite different in that way, where with conceptual art, you're more sort of, you're exploring ideas and so on and so forth. Then with the traditional stuff, it's more like you're creating functional objects and then also trying to tell stories. It wasn't until years later when I sort of started mixing the two, where I was sort of working with more conceptual base, but but my style was Northwest Coast.
Right. So you started mixing these ideas and more conceptual work into the carving practice. Yeah. But still telling stories.
Still telling stories. Yeah. I haven't really figured it out yet. Like it's always changing. Like I don't know. I can tell you what I think about it now, but that might change a year from now.
Yeah.
Like I've done interviews in the past, and I just what's that?
It probably should.
Yeah, because I see some interviews I've done in the past, and I'm just like, oh my god, what the hell was I talking about?
I know, we always think we're brilliant in the moment until we see it later. I want to shout out to the audience that's listening to us, and thank you all for listening tonight. And just to let you know, there is a little Q&A function at the bottom of your screen where you can send Luke questions, and we will try to answer them as it goes along. We may leave it till the end. We may pop some throughout. It depends on how we're feeling. Speaking of combining, I wanted to talk about the totem pole that you made for yourself, which was like kind of like also a commentary on the history of museums showing totem poles. And I'm thinking about the one where you made it and then you cut it as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was I actually made that for a film. There's a film made by the CBC called "The Timeless Totems of Skangway," and in that film, it's a documentary about when the Museum of Anthropology and Bill Reid, they went to Haida and cut down some old totem poles, and then cut them into pieces, and then brought them back to museums and private collections. And I saw that film when I was young. When I was young, it had a different name though. I think it was just called Totem Poles or something.
Yeah.
And it really like bothered me, sort of this idea that, because they kept on like talking about how they were saving these totem poles from they're saving the culture by saving the totem poles. And meanwhile, like the people who brought them there in the fishing boats were Haidas, and they always made a point of separating the Haidas, the past Haidas, from the contemporary Haidas. And it really annoyed me, so I wanted to do a reaction to that film. So what I decided to do that I would carve this totem pole, and I would cut it in half, and sort of mimicking what they did, but sort of the idea that I'm the Haida and I'm doing it, and at the end of the film, it's called Remediation. It's on YouTube. You can find it there. But at the end of the film, I burned the top half. And the reason I did that was I just wanted to show that, you know, I could destroy this totem pole and it's not going to affect the culture. Like, the culture is dynamic, it's vibrant, it's still there. And so I was really speaking about, you know, like I said, it was really just a reaction to that first film and the way it was framed.
I know there's been a lot of discussion about museums and how many hold, especially Northwest Coast, you know, belongings that are in museums everywhere. And I was having a conversation with an elder artist who was really hoping that some of the collection from England would come here, you know, to the AGO one time, and it wasn't coming because they were afraid that repatriation would happen as soon as it lands. But working in a museum, it's really interesting because, you know, it's so much about preservation, even not just preservation of our culture, which is like a fallacy, but preservation of art in general. You know, how does that brush up against, like, the Haida understandings or Nisga'a understandings of how we would see culture as something dynamic and changing, and totem poles being able to, like, go back to the earth, really?
Yeah. I think because, like, you know, there wasn't art and culture, it was just culture. And so there's always the assumption that the next generation would continue forward. And so I think it was more, the stories were more important than the objects. So the stories, so the intangibles were more important than the material, because the material you could always reproduce. Whereas intangibles, you sort of just pass on to the next generation. And so I think that's why it's, you know, like, residential schools were so devastating, because some of the stories were lost and some of the meanings were lost. And then all we have left is the material. And then all of a sudden we have to go to Vancouver or something in the museum to see the material, to see what, you know, to see these sort of things. So I think because, like, the totem poles, you know, every 100 years they sort of go back to the earth, and then the next generation carves a new one. But it's not exactly the same, because this totem pole is a story, and over those 100 years, the story has continued. And so the next totem pole will have all the stories that were on the past totem pole, but it'll have new ones as well. And so, yeah, and so I think we're just getting to the point where I think we're still reproducing the old totem poles, but we'll get to the point where we'll start telling our stories. I mean, that's what I'm doing. Just telling contemporary stories.
Are people afraid at all of some of the stories you tell in your work, or is everyone happy about it? Like,
well, no one said anything, but I'm sure there are people who aren't happy about it.
Why do you think?
I just think because there's always critics. You know, I've had, I mean, yes, I have had altercations where people didn't care for sort of what I was doing, but, you know, you kind of just have to deal with it and try not to change what you do too much, because, you know, my artwork is really, it's important that for me, it's important that I don't try to please other people with my artwork. Like, I can't, because I don't know what they're actually thinking, so I may as well just do what I want. And, you know, I try not to hurt anybody's feelings or anything, or try not to overstep my bounds. I mean, I used to be really, like, dogmatic about not using traditional stories in my work. Just because I feel like with Northwest Coast Art, it's been appropriated so widely that I didn't want to, you know, it's from a formalistic point of view, it's been appropriated. Like, you know, they use some stories, but I just thought I don't want to share the stories because I don't want people to think they are sort of ownership of the stories as well. I've kind of mellowed out a bit on that over the last couple of years. because I love the stories, and I think they're amazing. They sort of connect me to my culture, especially since I live so far away.
Yeah, I think I've gone through a similar kind of thing where I'm mellowing out on what I share and what I don't share, because I used to be so supremely private about cultural knowledge and really wanting to keep it separate and kind of safe in a sense because it's so separate, but then you end up splitting yourself in half too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't be totally you're at home in yourself in all places, right?
Yeah, and it's also like sometimes you start like when you don't use traditional stories, and you're just like, well, what the hell am I making this art for then? You know, for white people, you know, is that who I'm making it for? Like, you know.
I think it's also just that something about being an artist that maybe is different and has changed in our communities too. Like people who've gone to art school and all that, often you have to hold really strong to your personal vision when you
Yeah.
create stuff, or at least that seems to be the driving force, right? But even folks like more so, you know, there's always been kind of folks who had a vision and just barrel through and have face a lot of criticism, and then eventually everyone goes, oh, I'm so happy that they did that. You know, but it's usually after the fact.
Hope I don't have to wait that long.
I think there's a lot of interest and love for your work right here, right now.
Thank you.
So speaking of that, I was wondering if we could talk a bit about this series that you recently showed at MKG 127 Gallery. And I'm thinking specifically of the series of paintings that are each kind of titled after an exhibition. So Arts of the Raven or Beat Nation. And I think a lot of your work that I've seen does comment on kind of art history too, and the framing of art, which I think is really fascinating. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about where that was coming from.
Yeah, that was it's called Recontextualizing the Deconsecrated. That's the name of the series, which is a long-winded title, but it's apt. And so how I came up with the idea was originally I was teaching teaching some classes at the Frida Deasing School of Northwest Coast Art in Terrace, BC.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with like Stan Bevan and Dempsey Bob, and I was teaching like the art history portion of the class, like over just 2 weeks. So it was like a class every day. It was pretty intense.
Wow.
And I was teaching an exhibition history of Northwest Coast art to the class. And that's really where I got the idea for the project. And I was really interested, and I was also interested in the way the students were reacting to the curatorial statements behind the pieces and the criticism of the pieces, and just the way they were reacting to, like, especially the older exhibitions, like where it was all like created by white people and there wasn't any Native involvement except for they were just grabbing these pieces. And so, and the way they reacted was, you know, it was really amazing. And just see how they transitioned into, like, when you get into like the later exhibitions where it's like Native people and they respected it a lot more. And I thought it was really, and I just thought that's really interesting, you know. So I started sort of doing a bit of research, as much as, you know, an artist does research. But I don't think of myself as an academic, so.
Right.
But I really wanted to explore the idea from an artist's perspective. And so I really wanted to, so I looked at, and I wanted to use specifically Northwest Coast exhibitions because that's sort of what I was talking about. And I didn't want to get into sort of like a pan-Indigenous exhibition. That's why I started at Arts of the Raven. And I stopped at Beat Nation because that was the last major exhibition at that time.
Okay.
And so what I did was I looked at the curatorial statements of each exhibition, and I looked at criticism of each exhibition. And then I created like basically a didactic panel using the words, and I sort of like put it all together into some sort of, I don't know if it makes any sense, but it's different voices. So when people first see the exhibition, they think I wrote it, but it's like I didn't actually write any of it. I edited it. That's why like the voices seem so different.
Okay.
And as far as the paintings goes, I created the paintings based on either work in the exhibition or the curatorial statement. And I was even like appropriating things from our works in the exhibitions. Like I said, I was just really wanted to study the way it's changed over the years, from Arts of the Raven to Beat Nation, and trying not to judge, and trying to sort of just put it on display and let people decide for themselves whether, whether one way of curating is better than the other. And just to observe, where the perspective of the curator changes from an ethnological sort of curation to, Beat Nation, where someone has an understanding of the culture, the actual culture that the artwork is coming from, and see how that slowly
We should
developed over those years.
We should say Beat Nation was originally curated by Skeena Reese and Tanya Willard. Just shout out to them.
Yeah, definitely.
It did come to Toronto. It was at a power plant, so a lot of people here would have seen it in a different iteration later.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. I was really impressed.
Here as it went on.
No, I was like super jealous when I saw it. I was like, oh, I wish I was in the show.
I was super jealous. Wish I'd curated that show.
So I put myself in it.
Yeah.
In a way.
I know, it's perfect. Your little Luigi. There's or Mario, Luigi. That's what it was.
Oh, it was a pony.
It's a pony.
Yeah.
But it has like that kind of feel of Mario and Luigi, like just the aesthetic of it.
Yeah, I did a commission, totem pole commission before I started the project, so I was able to hire a couple of people to help me paint them. And so Raven Pearson painted the Beat Nation. She's right into like My Little Pony, and so that's why I chose My Little Pony for that one, because she was so into it. Because I wanted her to enjoy painting it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been looking back a lot at like kind of the history of Indigenous curators and artists who've done things in museums for a long time. And I mean, people like Dempsey Bob and Frida Dysing, who have like really brought back carving and training and all that into communities. And thinking about the Northwest Coast in particular, because it has one of the longest histories of being exhibited in different ways internationally, and one of the longest histories of being stolen. I was thinking about that tension, because each exhibition that you're looking at is like, one might have treated it as like pure form, like just the beauty of the aesthetic of it. Another might be like diving so deep into the community, trying to capture the culture and what it means, and kind of, like you were saying with ethnography and anthropology. And then moving towards like more First Nations looks, when we're looking internally, it's like much more about transformation and change and dynamism. So I was wondering how does that history kind of, do you feel constrained by that history? Do you feel free from that history? Do you feel like how does that kind of influence your own work? Because it will be framed as Northwest Coast art, right?
Yeah.
That frame can be constraining or amazing, or,
Yeah. I think it's like, I was thinking about this question. I think it's kind of like, it can be sort of all of the above. Like sometimes you feel constrained by it, and then sometimes, like, I've done work, nothing that I've really shown, but I've done work where I'm sort of trying to figure out, like explore the constrainment of the situation, like where, and so I think it's like with all these things, I sort of just explore it. Like I've done pieces like where I'm talking about, like, how the English language was used to, colonize our art, where like we use the term ovoid and S form and so on and so forth to describe our art, even though, my ancestors didn't call them that. Those were just sort of placed on it in a way of sort of, homogenizing it in a sense. And so, I do feel, it's hard to say that I should feel constrained by it, but I enjoy making, I enjoy carving, I enjoy the form, I enjoy form line, and I love making it. So it doesn't feel like it's constrained because I enjoy doing it. Yeah. And I also feel like, I feel more constrained by, I don't want to insult anyone from my culture.
Yeah.
And so I'll sort of hold back in that way. But as far as what I'm doing with outside of my culture, I don't really feel constrained at all. I just sort of, there aren't any ideas that I haven't really explored that I didn't want to.
Mm.
I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, I recognize it. I mean, even in the way people think, like I've worked with some younger artists and they talk about, I just want to do like traditional work,
Mm-hmm.
And I try to explain, well, we can't actually make anything traditional, like, because we're using acrylic paints and steel and so on and so forth. So even like
It's already
the
changed.
tools, the materials you use are actually, we'll talk about a lot when a piece is made and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So sometimes, our thinking can be constraining as well, like the way we look at things.
Yeah, it's colonialism that's kind of got us trapped in this contemporary.
Yeah, it's hard to break. I grew up in like this sort of resurgence of, not, I guess resurgence is a weird word, but anyway, of culture where I come from is, when I grew up, when I was young, we were still like ashamed to be Native, and I grew up in a really Native community, but it was very like colonial. And so I've had to break that thinking. Like I have to work on it, work on stopping that thinking all the time. Because I think the next generations, they were sort of encouraged to like embrace their culture more than I was growing up. And so I feel like my thinking can often be colonial, and it's really hard to like figure out what is and what isn't.
I think that's what's truly exciting about this next generation. Just there is no shame. It's like, it doesn't feel like it to me anyway. They don't have the same shame and don't have a lot of the same traumas either that our generation experienced as well, which helps. So taking up culture is like way younger and faster and, less of a journey in some ways, less of a journey through all this colonial.
Or even just having it available.
Pardon?
Or even just having it available to them if they want it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was growing up, it wasn't as available.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go to the audience for there's questions building up, so I want to make sure that other people have a chance to talk to you too. We have a question. I saw Phantom Limbs at the National Gallery. It is a wonderful piece. Could you speak about that and its title?
Yeah, that was when I was in Haida doing the filmmaking course. I was talking with Christian, and he had just gotten back from a trip to New York to look at they were trying to repatriate the remains back to Haida. And so that's when I first heard about the project. And then I saw a documentary about it. I was on a show called Ravens and Eagles. They had a 2-parter about it, and I was really excited. So I started doing a bit of research, and I was like, and at this time, this is when I wasn't doing like traditional stories at all. So I was always sort of looking for projects I work on. And so I was thinking, I don't think anybody owns this story, so I think I could probably work with this story. So what I did was, I did a bunch of research, and I found out that I wanted to do something. I'd also been wanting to do something with multiples. I've done a bunch of different sketches in my sketchbook about working with multiples, and sort of like when I found the idea for the Haida repatriation, and I knew I wanted to work with that. I'd also been wanting to work with multiples, and both ideas sort of were stagnant. And I had like a eureka moment. I brought them together, and I thought, oh, I can actually do both. And so I found out that 48 remains that come from the American Museum of Natural History, and 2 from Oakland. So I decided to work with 48. And I remember like they were talking about how when the remains got back to Haida, they were putting them in bentwood boxes and burying them. And then when I saw in the documentary that all the remains were in plastic totes. And so I thought I want to do the transition from the plastic tote to the bentwood box. So each one is in a little, it's acrylic, but I bent it, like I curve cut it and bent it. So they're actually acrylic bentwood boxes that they're in. And I did every one of them in a crouching pose, sort of like they would have been in a box. And I didn't put any eyes on them, but I used a lot of expression in the mouth. So I made the mouth actually bigger than it would normally be. And the reason put any eyes on them is I sort of wanted to have this idea that they were dreaming
Mm.
this time. And Phantom Limbs came from a quote. I can't remember who did the quote now, but they said, even though we didn't know they were gone, we missed them. I sort of had this idea of like a phantom limb, like when it's gone, you can still feel it even though it's gone. And that was like crazy because that, like, when I came up with the title, the project was already done, and we were gonna show it at, Lisa Myers and Suzanne Morissette curated it into the exhibition for the first time. The exhibition was like a month or 2 weeks or something, and Suzanne was like, "You got to come up with a title." And I was on the bus home one night, and I was like, "Phantom Limbs," and yeah, so the title came late.
And then working.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that was a really crazy project because I just started my master's degree at Emily Carr, and I still hadn't finished the project. And like, they curated a show for me and Meryl McMaster in the spring, and I cut out all the wood pieces and I cut out all the acrylic. I made all the little boxes, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on this project." And I told them all about it, and they were like super excited. And I was like, "Probably just gonna do one every 2 weeks for the next couple of years or something." And they're like, "Oh, we love it. We'll put it in the next show." I was like, "Okay, cool." Like whatever. Then they called me up like 2 months later, like, "The show's in October. You got to finish that piece." It's like, "Are you kidding me?" So I took the summer off, and I was like, "Well, I know I'm going to Vancouver in August, so I'll try to do most of the carving over the summer." So I saved money, and I was like, "I'm just going to take the summer off from work and just carve all summer." And when I left for Vancouver, I'd only done 6, so I had to carve like 42 over like 2 months. It was crazy. It was insane.
Yeah, that's intense. Do you feel like when you're working on a project like that, are you thinking about, are you feeling haunted at all by, the history, by the people who are being brought home?
Yeah, it was a tough project because each one of the little figures actually represented somebody in a way, even though I didn't know their names or anything like that, but I was representing a person for each one. And I stopped working on it that was why I only got 6 done in the summer. I stopped working on it for a while, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I should even be telling this story. Like, this is kind of intense." And like, even though they don't have eyes, like with the facial expression and the eyebrows, like they felt very real.
Yeah.
So they were like sitting around looking at me while I was carving, and so I stopped working on them, and I think about it, and I just had to think, well, you know what? Of all the remains that got back, some of them are probably my ancestors. So maybe it's okay to do this. Maybe it's not. Maybe I shouldn't have done it. I don't know.
I don't know. Standing in front of it, it feels like you did something really good.
Yeah, I was trying to honor them. Like, I was trying to do it very respectfully. It was hard though. It was a hard project to do.
Yeah. Sometimes when we're dealing with heavy histories and spirits and things, it's not so straightforward and not so easy.
Yeah.
Do we have one more question related to your art practice and whether it influences your teaching?
I think
what way?
It's more about the way I was taught that influences my teaching. I think I try to. It's tough though because the environment's so different. I was taught sort of a master apprentice sort of way. I've also had other teachers like Bonnie Devine and Robert Hoole taught me quite a bit, and sort of this idea of like showing and not telling. And I think, and so it has had an influence, in the way I teach, but also like just the classes I took at OCAD back in the day and Emily Carr have had an influence as well. And I think, when teaching philosophy has been around failure and around students, trying out new ideas and possibly failing at it. And I think that people learn more that way than they do through successes, especially in school, because it's not like the real world. Like there's a lot of room to fail there.
Yeah, you can safely fail.
Yeah, it's tough though. It's tough with, in a university though, to teach that way.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think art schools are getting tougher and tougher on students too, like to produce, to be fantastic, to be, It's hard.
Yeah.
It seems hard to me. I just find it, I found students to be very stressed about the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm stressed. They must be really stressed.
I think, yeah, I mean, that comes with the territory of being an independent producer, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a question going back. On the one hand, Luke, destroying a totem pole, and on the other hand, the function of the Museum of Preservation makes me think about the notion of the possibility of permanence. What can be permanent? So we're going philosophical here, which is where I sit all the time.
Yeah, well, I think I answered that already, and I said that I was talking about the intangible behind the pieces is what's permanent. Mm. Even though it's always changing and the story is always evolving, that's sort of that's the permanence, is that the story is always changing. And so, you know, these material objects, you know, they have to change with it as well. You know, because you're talking about like static versus dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. You know, so if you're still, you know, 200 years from now, if you're still making art based on something that was collected 200 years ago, made 200 years ago, I mean, that's 400 years, you know, it becomes a static piece. Whereas if you're, you know, if you go down to the corner and talk to your friend who's carving and look at what they're making, then that's dynamic. Like, you know, and it might be telling the exact same story. That, you know, both pieces could be telling the exact same story, but mm-hmm. one is being created by contemporary artists, and one was made by one of your ancestors who was telling the story about that at that time.
Yeah, and it has to be kind of adapted to now.
Yeah,
I do
so
find it interesting. There is a series of like younger women mostly that I've talked to who are combing through like museum collections, especially for weaving, like the Salish weaving and a few other things that I've seen. And they were saying that, you know, this whole thing about preservation holds them back because they actually need to touch it to know exactly how it was made, which kind of like, of course I should have understood that before, but you know what amazing. I mean? Like, it's kind of amazing. Like you have to kind of touch it and put the oils on it and do all the things that we're not supposed to do in order to actually make the thing again, or to find the maker in the work, you know?
Yeah. It's nice when you get to look at the pieces. Like all those pieces should be back with their communities. I mean, because we always like you see pictures in the books and stuff. Like I've seen pictures in the books and everything looks so perfect. But then you get to actually see the pieces and you can see like the mistakes that the artist made, and like, you know, this part is badly painted. You know, there's knife marks. So it brings the humanity back to it. Like, oh, this was made by some dude. This is made by some lady, like, you know, 100 years ago, and they were, you know, they had pressures on them, on their life, and, you know, maybe they couldn't carve all the time. Whereas if you just read books, they become like these gods that you sort of can't live up to.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's flat.
Yeah, I visited the American Museum of Natural History a few years ago, and I suggested that they should just 3D print everything and send all the original artifacts back to their communities. Because the life of the piece is important to us. It's not really important to them. You know, I think to them, I mean, it's kind of important, but I think it's mostly about having the collection, like the prestige of having these collections. Whereas with us, like, you know, seeing seeing the pieces and seeing like the knife marks and stuff, you know, and even just holding it and understanding that your ancestor held this piece as well, you know, that's important. That's an important connection for us, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting, like at the UMISTA Center, how the museum, you can, you know, people can take the stuff out and use it in ceremony and then bring it back. I thought that's like one way to try to break this sort of museum way of thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not ideal or perfect, but it was a compromise that could be made, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand their point of view. I mean, you know, the objects have value as objects. But for me, I just think, you know, there's enough documentation. Like, they don't need to keep them like anymore. Like I said, they could 3D print them and scan them and print them and have an exact copy of the piece. You know, or they can hire carvers to recarve them. You know. Like,
yeah, I would be more amenable to that idea, having them recarved and used in it. I don't know. Something about that 3D printing idea really disturbs me.
Yeah, it's weird.
Put my finger on it, but it really makes me.
Yeah, because nobody can actually get to touch them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no artist hand in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have another question. How do you think about incorporating others in your practice? I've seen you involve community a few times, and what are your thoughts around that? And what is your general approach or methodology around community engagement?
I've done it. I have done it a lot. I don't mean to, but it's like I said, I just get an idea, and then I decide that I have to do this idea, and I sort of figure out the best way to do it. Like when I made the film, I'm not a filmmaker, but I got this idea for this project, and I told people, and they're all like super excited. And so I was like, all right, man, I guess it's a good idea. I'm going to do it. And so like, you know, I wrote it up. I got a Canada Council grant, and I got this residency in Montreal, and everything sort of fell into place off of and it was just an idea. And then I have friends who are filmmakers. Sean Arden was the co-director, co-producer on the film. And he's a filmmaker, an amazing filmmaker. And so he helped me out a lot, and he was just like, and he was amazing. Like he did all the technical stuff. And I was like, well, how much should I pay you? He was like, I don't want to get paid. I just want to be on this project. I was like, that's so awesome. Then I did a piece called, what did I call that piece again? Originally it was called Reconciliation or Recolonization. And that was for a project through the Samara Contemporary Gallery. And that was with Rafi Gingolx. I always get his last name wrong. Where basically I wanted to explore reconciliation from an artist's perspective. And so it was weird because when I came up with the idea versus when I made it, my views about reconciliation had changed quite a bit over that summer. I still did the project. So what I did was, it was this 4-day art festival called Home Away. And so I'd done this house front design, a giant butterfly house front design. And then I like painted it, or I drew the design on 44 16 by 16 inch panels. And then I bought all this paint and all these paintbrushes, and I just had some tables set up, and I asked people to paint them. And all I asked them was, think about what reconciliation means to you, and then paint it. And I said, you can respect my lines or not, it's up to you, it's your painting. And so I had all this paint, and it's so funny because it's called Neon Reconciliation Explosion.
Yeah.
And so I bought this neon paint because a friend of mine was like, oh, buy neon paint and I'll come down. So I was like, all right. And then they didn't show up.
Oh no.
But I had all this neon paint, and people just started using it like left and right, and it ended up being this huge, amazing piece.
Maybe powwow, the neon actually.
Yeah, and then I reserved the last piece for myself, which was the door. And so I had all those ideas about what I was going to do, but by the time it was done, I'd really like soured on reconciliation. And so I didn't want to finish it because I didn't want people to feel like I was like gaslighting them, where I had this ulterior motive all this time when I didn't. And so it looks really hopeful, and it's really dynamic, and it's colorful. And then for mine, I just cut the hole out roughly, and these sort of like red and green, and it was really sort of muted tones, and I really struggled with how to finish it. And so I like carved in the initials for Golden Bushti and Tina Fontaine. And I really struggled with doing that, but I really had to be honest about why I soured on reconciliation. And those two court cases are really why, and what happened to those young people were really why I soured on reconciliation. So I thought, well, I have to be honest though, but I didn't want to use them.
Right.
So I really struggled with it for like a year. But I thought, well, I asked those people to be honest about what reconciliation meant to them, and so I have to be honest with what it means to me.
Yeah, and for anyone listening that doesn't know those two cases, please look them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, reconciliation is difficult in general because, I mean, from my point of view, we can't skip justice just to jump into reconciliation.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what you're talking about. These are two cases where there was no justice.
No.
At all. Yeah. Somebody was asking about that. That's the work that was in the MKG show, right? The big, huge, colorful one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's hopeful, but then you can feel that you know, that there is a demand in there, a request for something to get to that place. You can't walk through the door hopeful until, you know, all the things are in place to get there. There's people want to know about what's behind you.
Oh, this was okay. So the piece that we were talking about earlier. So there's 7 panels and seven paintings, 7 exhibitions in the show. Originally there were 8. One of them was the Transforming Image, which wasn't actually a major exhibition. It's a really important book for carvers. Some people call it the Bible for a Northwest Coast carver. And it was really important to me. And so I did this painting for that exhibition, and I showed it, and then I looked at it. All 7 of them were really important Northwest Coast exhibitions. One of them was a book launch. And I was like, I have to take it out. It was really important to me. That's why I kept it. It was really important to me. The book was really important to me. But if you really do the research, the exhibition wasn't really a major exhibition. It was just, you know, I'm sure it was awesome. I wish I was there. And so I had to take it out of the series, recontextualized and deconsecrated. And so now that's why there's only 7 in the series instead of 8.
It's very Anishinaabe of you, 7.
Yeah, or 8, or how do you say 8 minus 1, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what that is. That's from that exhibition that I had to take out of the series because it didn't fit. I just wanted it to fit.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Like as a curator, I would have just made it fit by saying, like, you know, you start with the personal space and then you move to the other spaces. Or if it's important to carvers, then it's a major exhibition, right? From a different point of view.
Yeah. Not for the story I was telling, though.
No.
They always say kill your darlings, right?
Yeah, it's true. But it looks really, it's like your head's right in front of it.
Yeah, I love it. You know, I don't usually put my own work up in my, I won't put my own work up in my studio hardly. I mean, yeah, I do, but I never used to. I just don't want to stay, I don't want to be static. I don't want to like stay in place. So I try not to put up too much of my own work.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so personal. It's almost perfect. It's almost like it was meant to be in your house, eh?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened until I come over and steal it.
Yeah. Oh no, I'd sell it. I mean, I don't have like a, you know, I'm not really nostalgic about my own work. I mean, once it's done, it's done.
Do you keep any pieces though for, you know how artists do
I
that?
only keep pieces if they don't, no, only if they don't sell.
Early?
Yeah, if they don't sell, then I don't, you know, I still have it. But,
okay.
No, I just, you know, I'm always more excited about the next piece. You know, I'm not even as excited about what I'm working on as I am the next piece. Like while I'm working on something, I'm always like thinking about what I want to do next. I'm just like, oh my God, that's gonna be so awesome. Like, and then you have to do the work to finish what you're working on. I really had to work. One of the skills I had to work on over the years was not rushing to finish because I'm so excited about the next project. And so you have to like I had to slow myself down and be like, all right, Luke, finish this properly.
Yeah.
The next project's gonna come. Don't worry, because I'm always excited about like what I'm gonna do next. And so what I've done in the past, I'm kind of like, it's like with one of the pieces at the National Gallery, Brief History of Northwest Coast Design. Like I had that for a few years before it sold, but people kept wanting to see it, so they kept showing it, and I was so sick of it. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sick of this piece. I'm sick of talking about it, and so then finally I went to the National Gallery, so I didn't have to store it anymore, and you know, I was like, but then like a year later, I went to the gallery again, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Like I just remember making it, like, and you know, all that sort of stuff. But no, I don't really feel super nostalgic about what I do. Unless I haven't seen it in a long time, then I'll get excited.
It's probably pretty true. Yeah, I was talking to Rita Latond about that, how she was saying like when you're painting or when you're working through something, the next project is always coming kind of into your mind because it's resolving maybe something or opening something from the current one. She's like, and you can't really find the next experiment until you finish the first because you don't know what you're supposed to resolve yet or what you're supposed to learn from the current one. So I always thought that was kind of amazing gift of knowledge. We are at the end of our session together.
Oh, that was you did a good job. I feel very relaxed.
Oh, yay. I didn't crack a lot of sex jokes at you or anything, so we're pretty good. Some days I'm worse than others. Some days I'm much calmer. Depends on my mood. It's really nice to get to talk to you online, and thanks so much for doing this. It's not always easy to talk through a screen.
Yeah.
So
you can just look at yourself.
Yeah, I know. I don't look at myself because otherwise I get too self-conscious. And so I'm just staring at your beautiful face.
Oh,
like,
thank you.
Such intensity.
Yeah, I scratched my regular glasses. These are actually my shot glasses. So.
Oh, really? I was wondering if they were just really cool.
Yeah, they're safety glasses. Like prescription safety glasses.
Okay, nice. So everyone's saying you did a great job and they really enjoyed it from the audience as well.
Danke.
And hopefully we will see each other very soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Calms down.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to the second wave. Like I was so lonely the first wave. I'm really not looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I actually found out I have a bit of agoraphobia. So if I stay home too long, it gets harder for me to go out. So I stayed 2 full months when I got back from Sydney, right in the thick of it. And then I couldn't even go for a walk. Like it was producing so much anxiety and stuff. And it's something I didn't even know about myself that I had to do baby steps in between because I was like unable.
Yeah, I'm the same. If I don't go out early in the day, then I won't go out. It's really annoying.
Yeah, the kind of shyness in that, I think.
Yeah, I've always been very shy as well, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, me too, but no one believes me. All right, well, have a lovely night.
Thank you
so much
for having me on. It was great.